Hi, I'm Mary Matz, and today we are going to show you how to make the keyhole scarf. There's a couple different techniques, and that's really what the focus of this video is about. But isn't it a fun little scarf? It's made on a flatbed, even though when you look at the work, you'd say, why don't you do it on a circular? But a lot of people don't have a ribber. So this one you can make without any fancy equipment. This one is made on a Brothers 230, but you could also use an LK 150 or some other similar machine like a Brother KX 350. Just a basic flatbed machine. So we're going to cast on our 23 stitches for the wider version, and I just pulled out 23 needles, and I'm pushing half the needles, every other needle back, and threading up my carriage. And I'm putting my tension about 9.1 click. I'm going to hang a cast on comb and bring my other needles back out, the ones that I had in work. Make sure I have all my stitches. So I have 23 stitches, and just knit a couple of rows. So I've ended on the left, and I cut my yarn, and now I'm going to feed a row of ravelcord before I start my main colors. So I'm just going to pinch it with my little clothespin and hand feed it. Just one row. 6, 7, 8. There's nothing special about this right now. I'm going to unthread my carriage and thread it with my gold. Now what I did is I put it around the edge of it, and I'm going to do 8 more rows using the gold. And we're just going to keep going until I have 20 stripes. We've just completed our 20 stripes, ending with the gold, and at this point I want to do a couple of things. First off, starting at the left-hand side, I want to transfer every other needle one stitch to the left, so that leaves an empty needle here. We're going to take that one out of work, and so we're going to go quickly over this. Okay, so now we've transferred them, and now we're going to go back here and make sure that all the empty needles are out of work, and move these back into a nice position, nice working position. Okay, and then at this point, now all the work is done with the carriage. We're going to reduce our tension 2 full sizes tighter on the stitch size on the dial. So we've now made our stitch size smaller, because we are going to be working across these, just the needles that are in working position, every other needle. Of course, I have to change my color. Now, if you were doing this in solid, on this row, you would run a piece of ravelcord with this yarn. But since we're doing stripes, it's very evident what the last row color is. And you always change after the last row of a color in the stripe. So your stripe is right on that, at that point. Okay, so now we're going to knit the keyhole. 40 rows. 1, 2. So we have just finished our keyhole section, and so now we're going to rehang our stitches. Now we're going to start by picking up the last stitch in the row, but we're going to pick up the upper loop of it. This would be the one that has the ravelcord on it. Okay, and so it's if you look at the stitch, you see the gold. It's the one just above it. That's the one we're picking up, and we're rehanging. And on this last stitch, you kind of have to get in there because it's like the little knot on the edge, and hang that one on the end stitch. Now we're going to go back. I'm going to push these out a little bit. We're going to go back and we're going to go between the stitches and pick up the bottom of that stitch and hang the bar on the empty needles, the ones that were vacated earlier to create the keyhole section. Now we're going to refill them with those. Down here you're going to pull a little bit. It's that one right there. Okay, now all our stitches are filled. But because this is kind of an interesting row, we're going to help our carriage along by moving all of them into the hold position, but we're on knit, so they will knit off on the next row. Next thing you need to do is change your color, because we need to be on gold at this point. So we're changing our color. And we're bringing our tension back up, our stitch size back up to 9.1 to match the other stripes, because this is the only time that you're going to be doing that. Now, we're going to knit one row. Okay, we've got the first row of the next stripe knit. So, at this point, I'm going to point out what we have here. We're going to start hanging the side stitches on these next rows. So, but because we wanted to close that up, we're going to start a little bit differently. Okay, this one we're going to pick up right here. If you can see it, that one should have been hung on the last row, but because we were closing that off, we would put it on this row. On this side, we are going to hang the first long stitch. Now, if you look carefully, you have a long stitch and you have a knot. You have a long side stitch and a knot. A long side stitch and a knot. And so what we want to do is we want to pick up the first long stitch. Now, this is actually the spanning between the two sides of this. So the first real long stitch is on the side is right here. Now notice, I want to go under the color. And the reason is, if I go under that carrying strand, this carrying strand will actually be in the center. You also want to be on the outside of the carrying strand of the prior row. In other words, you don't want this to get caught out there. You want this to be on the inside, and you want this to be on the inside also. Now, a little trick that I've learned is if I pull my yarn over and I clip it over here, it's going to keep it to the center. So, we have this one hung because it's the first row. It's one row too late. Usually, you're hanging on the opposite side from the carriage. So, this is the side that we'd be normally hanging when our carriage is on the left. So, we'll knit another row. Now, that's row 2 of this stripe. So at this point, notice this yarn is now on the inside. We'll leave that there. We'll pick up our transfer tool and we'll go to the next long stitch on this side. And you can see them. They're very obvious because you can really see the little knots. And so you want to insert your tool from the inside out and just hang it. So we've already hung that one. We're going to knit one more row. We're going to come back to this side and hang the next one. Come back to the side, and see the yarn is being held over here to the inside. Come back to this side. Now, see this long strand here? That's actually the yarn traveling between the two sides of the scarf. Ignore that one. This is the next one. We're going to from the inside out, we hang that. Okay, now I'm going to have to add some more yarn on, but I'm going to show you how to get rid of this yarn tail without any extra work. It's really rather easy. Pull my needles out into hold, and I'm going to just simply go up and down between these needles until I run out of yarn. Now, I prefer doing it in this direction because then when the carriage goes over it, it pulls up against it. So there you go. So now I'm going to just push that up against there, and when I knit across the next row, I will finish it. Okay? So I'm going to pick up my last color loop on this side and put it on this needle too. I missed that one before I pulled my needle out. Okay, so we're ready to go. Now you can add a little teeny weight over here to keep this held in place, but we should be just fine. All right, so I'm going to knit from the left side to the right. Okay, so see, that is all threaded in. Now whatever tail is left here, we're going to leave it in the middle, and as it's washed, it'll just sort of float in there, and it won't go anywhere. Now, we have to do another thing. On this side, we're going on to red, so we're going to bury this one on the next row too, but I just wanted you to see how we're doing this. We're going to lift up the red. This is one of the easiest ways to see what we're doing. Lift up the red and hang it. Okay? And then I'm going to do the same thing I just did a minute ago. I'm going to go up and down with this yarn. So I can get rid of it. I can release my clothespin that was holding the red down. Okay, and whoa, there we go. We're going to change colors. So the gold is over there. We have our strand tied in. We have our needle on the end already ready to go with a hung stitch. And so we're going to continue. Now, isn't that nice? That thread's hung in, is woven in. We're going to cut that end so it's about an inch maybe. That's a little bit more than an inch, so we'll just leave that there. And we're ready to go. Now, if we don't watch it, that gold was going to be on the outside. So this is where, once we move over that first pass of the first color, you're going to move this over here. And we're going to come to this side and pick up the first red long loop. And we're going to continue going back and forth until this stripe is finished, and then switch colors and move on to the next one. When I got back to the last stripe, I realized I hadn't woven this gold end in. So I'm weaving it back and forth over the stitches. Now I've knit row 7 of this stripe, of an 8-row stripe. I put my little clip on it just to give it a little tension. And I am going to knit across this row. I've already hung my end stitch. So I'm going to knit across this row, which is my last row of gold. How amazing is that? Now I can trim this back to about 1 inch and just tuck it in. Now, I still have this end of gold that I just cut off at the very end. So here I can weave it again on this row, because this is the last row of gold that's going to be knit off by red this time. So now at this point I'm changing colors to my red. So my red is threaded and I'm on the last 8 rows. And of course I'm going to hang my stitch on this end. So what we want to do, pull up our tension. All right, we just did it. And so this one can be cut off to 1 inch. That one's woven in. Now we just return over here and we start finishing it by hanging the ones on the right and the left alternately, just like we did before. Now that's row 6. So here's the yarn from the beginning of the scarf. And so I'm going to do the same thing with that. I'm going to bury it. We have to go back to our ravelcord row and pick up each one of these stitches. Let's see. There it is. Okay. We're going to pull our ravelcord out. Okay, and take away our waste yarn. Now I'm going to do one last inspection to make sure I've got everything, because this is our final row. Well, you got your tension up as high as you can get it, and we're going to knit 1 row across. And then we're going to take our latch tool and do a loop-to-loop bind off. All right. Now we're going to snip it, and I'm going to give it a really long length. And there's a reason for that. I'm going to pull this loop through and take my hardware off, weights and such, and give it a good stretch. So I promised you that you'd only have one end to weave in, and there it is. However, if you choose to fringe it like this one, with the same color that is hanging off there, you don't even have to weave it in, because you can bury it in the fringe. So, we have just finished a keyhole scarf. And isn't that nice how that edge matches so nicely? It looks like it was knit that way. And what I like is it gives it a little stability because it folds on those lines that where we lifted it up. So we just finished fringing it, and I just buried that last little strand of that. Instead of weaving it in, I just buried it and knotted it right into the fringe. And so that is what our keyhole scarf looks like when it's finished.
Thanks for watching. Please click my picture to subscribe to the Twisted Yarns YouTube channel, where you can see more machine knitting and crochet videos too.